I want our audience to kind of understand how Wendell works, because when we were introduced, this is in 2023, I was introduced because you had Wendell and you were thinking about building out around Wendell. And as you talked to, and your team talked to us, we're like, well, why don't you put your deck in Wendell? And, you know, we aren't the traditional kind of polished founders. In fact, purposefully so. But that means that like we make traditional venture capital very uncomfortable. Um, Being female led, the way that we present ourselves to the world, and the way that we're basically taking on some really big players in the industry and saying, no, they're doing it wrong and we can win. I think a lot of traditional VCs like this woman is crazy. I don't think she's that smart, because they just look at me and immediately think that I can possibly have a brain. And so they kind of write us off. But when we put all of our stuff in Wendell was like, no, this is a good investment. It was validating for me, because I was like, I know I'm on the right path. So as a founder, it was actually like something that made me feel like, okay, we're onto something, even if like, even with the judgment, even if people don't get it. And now I like to tell people that Connetic, and I think this is true, and correct me if I'm wrong, you really were the first AI driven venture capital fund in the industry.
I believe that to be true. I think there's probably one or two articles I've read over the years of people that, you know, I know there's a big tech company, very famous out in the valley, that was doing some things. I think they had some struggles with their models. I have a theory on why. So we sort of took a weird tactic. So if you think of, traditional venture firms that are doing stuff, the growth stage ventures, like all the rage, right? Everyone talks
Mm-hmm.
about that, Series A. And I think one of the reasons, and it makes sense, is by the time you get to, you've been, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years old, you've got some, easily identifiable KPIs, financials. That's hard data, right? That's structured data that people can wrap their heads around. And there's certain metrics that, those VCs could plug in and they say, wow, that looks like that they've really figured it out. I'll just pour some growth capital. But the thing of it is, I was more fascinated with, again, this was just because where could I compete? I couldn't compete with those firms at that level. I really needed to front run those trades, and I needed to get, shares in these solid companies, before they reach that growth stage, which is going to be popular with founders anyways, because as you know, that's the hardest. Pre-seed and seed is the hardest fundraise you'll ever go through.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't have any of those metrics, and no company has those metrics at those stages. And so what possibly could I measure? And to me, it was super obvious, regardless of how challenging, because everyone says it out of their mouth. You know
Mm-hmm.
what? The founder, co-founder, and the early team is the most important thing. Team, 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 team. I'd bet on the A team and a B, whatever. We could go down all the, isms, and at one way or the other, whether it's the most important, the second most important, or third most important, it's almost unanimous that when you're an early stage product company, team is crazy important. But I was wondering, at all these different angel groups and all these different things that I had personally invested in, why was no one measuring this? If it was so important, you're telling me that it's impossible for me to assess whether Shayna or Brad or anyone listening has got high potential. Well, I don't think that's impossible, because they do it in other industries. They do it in athletics. I mean, they
Mm-hmm.
do it in the NFL. They do it in the NBA. You do it at NASA, the FBI. People matter. So we sort of went out in the world, and I guess psychologists just aren't investors. They don't make enough money. And that's why they're never part of the conversation. So we just started, calling psychology departments at different universities. I talked to tons of them. We read tons of books. We took many different assessments. And the weakness of all the ones that were available in the world was sort of their validation process, because they were based off like general population, or they were based off college educated general population. But I'll tell you something about founders and entrepreneurs. We ain't normal. And I
Mm-hmm.
really needed a data set. If I was going to do some sort of psychological experiment, I really needed it to be a comparative analysis of this very super special set of humans. Doesn't exist. So we just sort of took the knowledge that we had on how to build, what's really most people don't know about psychology. It's a mathematical science.
Mm-hmm.
And so we built proprietary assessments from the ground up. And so Wendell's superpower is he's an AI psychologist. And Wendell delivers these proprietary assessments and tries to tease out, a couple concepts. A lot of times we call them soft skills, but we take the soft skills, we turn them into hard data, and it's supposed to cut through the crap. Like no matter
Mm-hmm.
what appearance you put on, you're over the top. I'm a little weird, and that creates biases, which is what you're talking about. But let's cut
Mm-hmm.
through that crap. Let's get right to the heart, or right to the soul of who are you as a human. Who's your early team members? Can you even do this? Will you enjoy doing this? Because these things are important. The human, we're capable of anything. But if you don't like it, you're going to burn out. Burnout is probably the largest problem in Midwest founders, right? It's harder than they thought. Fundraising sucks. They don't want to pivot. It's just, so we cut through that. We take all these theoretical soft skills, we turn it into hard number crunching data. And when I look at founders through our system, I just see ones and zeros. I don't see you. I had no idea, sort of like your persona or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
You just were compared to all the other founders in our system that were already either successful or not successful. And we're just trying to get an edge, And so we believe that highly gifted people that are suited for venture backed startups have an edge over the average person. And if I build a portfolio of special people, we're going to make money. And we build an entire business off it.